All right, welcome everyone to this episode of Map Time Davis. Today we are going to be building web maps in Leaflet. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen, this workshop is a part of a large number of organizations, including Map Time Davis, Data Lab at UC Davis, and this workshop is also being run as a part of UC Love Data Week. So for those of you joining us from outside of Davis and around California and potentially around the world, and also inside Davis, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I think today we're going to have some fun learning how to build web maps in Leaflet. My name is Michele Tobias. I am the geospatial data specialist. I didn't fix that other slide, so we'll just skip to this one. Again, my name is Michele Tobias. I'm the geospatial data specialist at UC Davis Data Lab, and I am your host for Map Time Davis. And today I'm actually going to be presenting a workshop for you on Leaflet. So really quickly, of all the things that this is a part of, we're going to run through all the different entities that are involved today. So what is Map Time? Map Time is literally time for making maps. It's a kind of meetup that happens all over the world in most major cities. Most of them have some form of Map Time, and Map Time Davis is our special version of this. It tends to be a little bit more on the research method side, and so we're a little bit different in that respect. But sometimes, I don't know, we have folks from everywhere come because we're online this school year, so it's kind of nice to be able to share that with everyone. Map Time Davis is coordinated by UC Davis Data Lab's Spatial Sciences Research and Learning Cluster, and in particular, a group of folks that we call Map Time Davis Council. This year, this group is new and providing so much support to make sure that Map Time Davis can continue, because it takes a lot of work to put these on, you may not realize. So I mentioned Data Lab. Data Lab is an entity on campus that our goal is to help increase UC Davis researchers' impact via data-driven expertise. So we work with researchers, both students and faculty, to help people with data science questions, with data science learning, and provide support in that arena. Part of that is workshops, including Map Time Davis. And then also this is a part of UC Love Data Week, which is a week of workshops and presentations around issues with data. So data access, management, security, sharing, preservation, those kinds of things. So that's why we wanted to present this today, because Leaflet's a really cool way to share data and to visualize it and let people explore data in unique ways. So that's why we're doing Leaflet as a part of UC Love Data Week. So how can you get involved? If you want to get involved in Map Time Davis specifically, we're always looking for folks to join us in helping to present workshops, to plan, to become a helper at workshops, and also present them. So if you're interested, let me or one of our Map Time Davis Council folks know. You can obviously put it in the chat and someone will be able to field that question for you and get you hooked up with some more information. We will be having a call for applications in the next couple months or so. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. All right, so today that is our little intro to what is all the things, and then we will start our workshop. So let me switch gears here real quick. All right. So let me get the chat up too, so I can give you some links. So I'm going to paste the link to today's workshop materials, which you can see on the screen here as well. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you so it's a little easier to see. You're welcome to follow along online with the materials, and the materials will stay online for, we're not planning on taking them down, so they should be available for you to come back to later. Like I mentioned earlier, while folks were coming in, today's workshop, I think, will be really challenging to try to follow along with and code along if you only have one screen. If you got 2 screens or 3 screens, it might be a little bit easier because you can park the video on one screen and then work on the other. But if you're working on just one screen and you're trying to follow along and it gets frustrating, I want to encourage you to just keep watching and then come back to the materials later, because there's going to be a lot of detail. We're going to be doing some coding, and the code is going to get a little bit more complicated. So just a heads up, we're obviously welcome to try to follow along, but know that sometimes it's good to just try to do one thing, and watching is more than enough. All right. So today's workshop is about Leaflet. The plan for today, the learning objectives we should go over are that my plan is by the end of this, you will get some introductory skills in HTML. In particular, you're going to learn about some common tags and how tagging works in HTML. We're also going to learn how to load JavaScript libraries into a web page. We are going to specifically work with Leaflet, the JavaScript library Leaflet, and get you some more resources for where to get help with learning more about things like HTML and Leaflet and JavaScript. Also, by the time you leave, you'll have some ideas of best practices for communicating data, specifically spatial data, with web maps. Today's skills that you will be learning are some HTML, some basic HTML, some basic JavaScript, and a little bit more in depth about the Leaflet JavaScript library in particular. Some prerequisites for today. You don't necessarily need to have all the prerequisites, but I'm going to make some assumptions about what you already know. In particular, I'm going to assume that you have a basic understanding of spatial data today, and that you understand the difference between things like raster and vector data. We're not going to have time to go through all of that. What I am going to assume you don't know today is I'm going to assume you have no experience coding in either HTML or JavaScript. So that's where we're going to start from with the base. If I said things like vector and raster data and you're like, oh no, I don't know what that means, don't worry, we can catch you up with that later. I would recommend continue watching the video today, and we can get you some materials to understand some of that stuff and fill in some of the gaps later. You'll still be able to do the workshop even without that. I'm just not going to stop to explain them. So today's software and tools are pretty low key. So today we're going to need a text editor of some sort. I'm going to be showing things with Atom because it is available for all of the major operating systems. So it works on Mac, Linux, and Windows. But if you work on Windows specifically, my favorite is Notepad++. That's my go-to text editor. But like I said, today I'm going to be showing Atom just so that everyone can potentially follow along. But if you want to use a different one, if you have a favorite, something you're more comfortable with, by all means use that. I would recommend something with syntax highlighting. That's why I like Atom and Notepad++, but you can also just use a regular WordPad that comes standard on all the computers. The other thing you'll need is a web browser. Pretty much anything but Internet Explorer at this point should be fine. So things like Chrome and Firefox and Edge should work for today. So you probably already have all those things. Most notably, I know you've got a web browser because you're on Zoom with us. So that's the prereqs and all of that, the intro to stuff today. So what I want to do is stop and ask if you have any questions. You can use the chat, and our helpers today will keep an eye on that and let me know if you have questions. So I'll pause for a minute. Not seeing anything pop up, but if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat for Zoom, and then someone will alert me to that, or I'll see it depending on how focused I get. All right, so let's jump into the materials then for today. I'm going to be showing you a little bit on the written materials until we switch over to the coding part, and then we'll still be using these materials. I'll just show them on and off. Okay, so what is a web map? We're here to do web maps, right? There's two really common ways to put maps onto a web page. One of them is a static map. These are things like where you take a screenshot or you export a map as an image file, something like a TIFF or a PNG or a JPEG file. So it's an image of a map, but it's static. It doesn't change. You can't do anything with it aside from zoom in and out on the page itself. So you can't change any part of it, like the scale or the contents. And these are really useful when you don't want your user to interact with it. You don't want the user to change it. So things like supplemental materials for like a journal article, you don't really want the user to do something different with it. You want to present a specific story. So static maps are really good for that situation where you need things to stay the same. On the flip side of that is this web map that we're going to learn about today. These are typically embedded in a web page. They're different though than a static map because they allow the user to interact with the data in the map in some way. Oftentimes you can do things like pan and zoom. You can adjust your view. You can click on data markers and get more information about a specific location. And you've all seen these, right? Like you've played with Google Maps, that's a web map. You've played with I think of things like when you go to a new business or something and they have a, about page, how do you find us? And then they have like the slippy web map that you can like see where they're located and like get driving directions and things like that. That's a web map. I think most people are familiar with this concept, but I wanted to make sure that we understood the difference between a web map and a static image of a map on a web page. So we're going to be focusing on web maps today, working with the interactivity. So why make a web map? I want to give you guys a chance to answer this. Obviously, you can see on the screen here my ideas, but why don't you go ahead and put in the chat reasons why you might be interested in making a web map. So you can pull up the chat window and give me some reasons why you in particular want to make web maps or some things you can see doing with them. All right, I'm seeing some answers. So things like making data available to your user, being able to interact with your data, sharing large data sets, that's a good one. Exploring and viewing for folks. And allowing the user to change your area of interest and view the data. Yeah, these are all really good reasons. And I think the underlying reason why you want to make a web map is honestly that interactivity. So I'm seeing some more answers. Update the map without effort to incorporate the latest, newest data. Yes, I will show you an example of a map that updates itself and runs on Leaflet. And then also somebody says to stay up to date and visualize information. Yes, these are all really good reasons to do that. And at the heart of the reason why you want to use a web map really comes down to that interactivity, allowing the user to shift how they view the data and explore it in their own way and answer their own questions that you can't do with a static map. When you try to do that with a static map, you end up having to come up with all the scenarios and make all the maps someone might want to see, but you can't ever think of all of them because everyone has their own ideas about like what they want to look at. So when you need that interactivity or you want your user to be able to interact with the data and visualize it in their own way, that's a really good time to think about web maps. It can be a really good way to share data too. So I've used these for supplemental information on a journal article where you can only make so many maps and they'll only let you put so many in the journal article itself. So you can make a supplemental web page and put your data there and let people interact with it and explore and zoom and pan and compare things. The other reason to do it is, quite honestly, it's just fun. We like playing with these things and we like asking and answering our own questions. So you give your user the ability to do that when you have a web map. So there's a bunch of other text here you can read later. To some examples, this is one that we built in Data Lab at the beginning of this year. This takes, and all these are linked in the, there it goes. I was like, oh no, it's not loading, but I'm trying to teach this workshop. So you can see the whole thing. This is a web map that we built in Data Lab at the beginning of the school year that literally scrapes data off of the UC Davis potential COVID exposures website and then processes it into spatial data. It basically does a table join on building names, and you can step through potential COVID exposures in buildings over time on the UC Davis campus. So you can kind of see when the timeline now is getting, because it's so long now, it's getting harder to read, but you can kind of see when students come to campus in the summer. And yeah, so you can click through that. You can click on the play button, and it'll play itself. But this is an example of a web map that updates itself. Every day goes to the COVID exposures official campus page, and it scrapes new data and pulls it in, and then builds the data that it needs to make the web map, and just updates automatically. So that's an example of a web map that updates itself. I'm going to go ahead and pause that. And again, this is linked in the materials, so if you want to play with that, you can. There's also some other fun things like sharing data. This open railway map is a good example of how to use a web map to not only show people what the extent of your data is, but also help them explore what your data set has. And this is a user contributed data set. So you can also use this to help people understand where they can contribute. So for example, like Europe and North America look like they've got really good coverage, but maybe they need some help in places like South America and Africa to fill in gaps that there may be. I'm not super familiar with the rail systems in those continents, so I'm not sure how filled in that data set is, but you could certainly use it to help people understand the status of your data. And then obviously you can pan and zoom, so I can zoom in here, and I can, doesn't look like I can click on things to get more information on this one, but you can see, like, looks like they probably need some help in California too. I think there's more rails in there than is showing. But anyway, so that's just an example of using a web map to help people understand your data set and potentially share data. This last one I want to show you is an example that I think is super fun, because they're using a leaflet web map, but they're actually not mapping the Earth. This is a map with Mars, so it has a Martian coordinate system, and it shows the location of one of the Mars rovers that is roving around on Mars. So you can see they actually have tiles for Mars, and you can get those, and you can make your own map of Mars if you want. Very similar to the way we are going to make a map of campus today. So I think this is a really fun example that you're not just stuck to mapping Earth. You can get a coordinate system for other planets and use that as well. So just some examples, some potential inspiration out there. There's a bunch more examples on here that I'm not going to go through today on this particular workshop, but you are welcome to check all those out and see if you can find some inspiration. I see a comment in the chat from Jenna saying the sky is literally the limit. Yes, point taken. So today's workflow, the way that we're generally going to work on web maps, and this is the general workflow when I'm building a web map, whether it's for a workshop or something else. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a web page to contain that web map. So that's what we're going to do, some HTML coding today. Don't worry if you don't have experience with HTML. We're going to do something really basic that should be hopefully pretty straightforward, and then give you some information about how to make it more complex if you want later. So once we make our web page, then we're going to make code for a web map that's going to go inside our web page. And then the final part of this is putting your web page online. And that's the third step we're not really going to focus on today. I'm going to focus on the first two steps, but I do have some information about how to, I've got some links for how to put it on a GitHub Pages site, which is pretty well documented, and I feel like it's fairly straightforward. Not that it doesn't sometimes have its hiccups, but it's not too difficult to do that. So we're going to focus on making the web page and doing the code for making the web map today. And like I mentioned multiple times already, we're going to use Leaflet. It is a JavaScript library that's very popular. It's really well documented, and there's some really good tutorials out there on Leaflet, and some good examples, but also there's a lot of posts and help out there on things like Stack Exchange, all the places you would normally look for help with stuff. So I find it's fairly easy to find answers to questions or example code to use as an example for something, if I'm trying to do something in particular, like in the COVID exposures map, the timeline at the bottom, that was something I found just Googling how to put a timeline on my leaflet map. So there's a lot of good help out there. There's a nice community around Leaflet as well. For those of you who are R programmers, there also is a Leaflet package for R, which we're not going to cover today. I just want to mention it in case that's of interest, knowing that our campus, Davis, has a lot of folks who use R. But Leaflet is not the only web mapping tool out there. There are dozens of options, and I've just listed a few here in this section. Most notably, last week we had a workshop on D3 from Mina, which was a really nice introduction into using D3 to web maps. So you can also use things like Carto and Mapbox and ArcGIS Online, and there's 2 different kinds of story maps, tons of different things like open layers, and that's not even all of it. There's so many other options out there. So if today we're going to do Leaflet. It'll give you a good introduction into the process of building web maps and some of the terminology. But if you end up not wanting to use Leaflet, by all means, find something else if you need to make a web map. There's a lot of good options out there. And today's data we're going to be working with is the UC Davis Campus CATS data set. I wanted to pick a data set that was kind of a little lighter and a little bit more fun to work with. Plus cats go well with the internet, it seems. So I think it's a good choice. I think there's enough heavy stuff out there in the world right now. So we're going to do something a little bit more on the fun side. But I hope you'll be able to see how you can take the data that we're going to work with today and how you can adapt your data in similar ways to make a web map as well. So it doesn't matter that it happens to be cat locations on the UC Davis campus. I think you'll see how you can transition your own research data and other data sets to work in a very similar way. So we've got this data set with permission from the, I'm looking for the exact name of the program in the text. This is from the first year Aggie Connections program on the UC Davis campus. And the goal of that program is to get first year students into groups to explore campus, but also to make connections with other first year Aggies on campus. So it's a really nice program, and they happen to have this web map data that we came across. Someone on the data lab team saw a Reddit post about it, and we were like, we really want to do a workshop with this data. And the Leaflet workshop just kind of flowed really nicely with this. So we've adapted their original KML into GeoJSON, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. But just know that we picked this data set for a lot of reasons, because it's fun, but also because it gives you a little introduction into a really cool program at UC Davis as well. All right, so any questions so far? I'm seeing that there's a note that our link is broken. I will make a note of that and fix it. Of course, I did not check that link today, but that's all right. You can probably Google it or go to the UC Davis website and search for their first year Aggie Connections and probably find more information about that until we get the link fixed. But thanks for letting us know. Okay, so again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will address those as they come up. So today, our workshop, we've done sort of all the preliminaries. I've told you about what the workshop's going to be and giving you kind of an overview of it. So now we're going to get down into the details. So the first thing we need to do is set up our file structure and our folders that in the way that we need to use them for making our web map. So the first thing we want to do is download our data. This is also available on the GitHub repository for this workshop, but the easier way to do it is to go to this Box account, which is my Box account, and you can download the data here. You may have a little pop-up that comes up here at screen and says something about logging in. You don't need to log in. You can just download the data if you click on the button and click download to get the campuscats.js file. This is our data file. So you'll want to grab that. I think shouldn't take too long to download. It's just a text file, really. So I guess what I will do is ask you when you are, okay, put the box link in the chat. Yeah, it's also in the workshop materials. So this should work. So you can also click on the link here in section 2.1 for the box drive. So when you get your data downloaded, for those of you who are like trying to follow along, go ahead and in your, where is it? Sorry, because I'm sharing, I have a slightly different menu. There should be a reactions menu. Go ahead and click the green check mark if you're ready to go. So you can use your reactions menu and go ahead and click the green button if you are ready to go. Here we go. I needed to open my participants window to see y'all. And if you are just watching today and not trying to follow along, go ahead and click your green check mark too. That way I'll know that you're ready to move on to the next thing. So it's looking like a good number of folks are ready. Zoom sometimes turns off the reactions after like 5 seconds. So I think we're good. If anyone is having trouble, go ahead and post in the chat if you need some help, and we'll our helpers will try to get you some help and help you sort things out. Okay, so that's our data. This is our data file, and we're going to build the rest of our website around that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to set up our folder structure. So what I'm going to do is let's see, some stuff. I also don't need PowerPoint anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that just so that my brain is less cluttered. What I'm going to do is move this out of the way. So I've got my file explorer. Depending on what operating system is, depending on what operating system you're using, it may be called something else, but in Windows, by the way, I'm on Windows 11 as of last week. I got switched over. So if you're on Windows, you may see, and you haven't switched over, mine may look a little bit different than yours. It's not substantially different, but it's a little bit different. So I've got my file browser open, and what I want to do is I'm going to navigate to the place where I want to set up my web map files. You can put this anywhere on your computer for today. Just put it somewhere where you can find it. So I'm going to put mine on my D drive, and I actually have a folder that I want to work in that I made earlier I called it Workshop Scratch Space, because I know later I'm going to want to delete this because I've got, I think, 3 or 4 copies of this workshop materials on my computer. I'll know that this one I can get rid of later, but you should name yours something where you can find it. Put it in a folder where you know where it is, because we're going to have to navigate back to this a couple times. So if you're following along in our workshop materials, what we want to do is, now that we're in our workspace that we want to work in, so just whatever folder on your operating system, I'm going to make a new folder. So on Windows, one easy way is to right click and then pick new and then folder. If you're on Mac, there may be another way to do that. On Windows, there's also the new button up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm making a new folder, and I'm going to call it my_web_map. Don't use spaces in your files. It can make things a little bit hairy if you put spaces. So we're going to go old school and make sure everything has no special characters in it. So I wouldn't use things like apostrophes. I wouldn't use ampersands or anything like that. I'm going to be very simple and make sure that I have no special characters. It'll just make life easier. Okay, so I've got my folder called my web map. This is going to be sort of the top of our directory for our web map project. So I'm going to go into my web map folder, and I'm going to make another folder, and in it, I'm going to call it, make a new folder here, and I'm going to call this folder docs. And the docs folder is where all of our web mapping things are going to live. This is a really common way to organize your web map files, especially if you want to use something like GitHub Pages. You can put all the web stuff into the docs folder and then use that to point GitHub Pages to. Okay, so now we have our docs folder. And if I expand my file browser here on the side, you can see I've got my web maps, and then inside my web map is the docs folder. Now what I want to do is I'm going to move my data that we just downloaded into the docs folder. So I have my data stored. I put a copy of it here. So I'm going to just grab my copy of Campus Cats.js, wherever you downloaded that to. And I'm going to go back to my docs folder in the folders we just made, and I'm going to paste it there. Here's paste. Windows 11 made a lot of icons that I'm just getting used to because I'm looking for text. Okay, so what I've done, just to recap, is I moved my Campus Cats.js file that we just downloaded, and I put it into the docs folder that I just made. So, so you're going to have to find wherever you downloaded that to and move it into your docs folder. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new empty document that's going to hold my HTML. The way that I like to do this on Windows is to right click and go to the new menu and tell it to make a new text document. You could also do this in your favorite text viewer. So whether that's Atom or Notepad++ or just your Notepad, you can make a new file and you're going to name it index.html. The way I like to do this is use the menu, make a new text document, get rid of all of the name on it, and I'm going to call my new file index.html. I'm going to hit enter, and then it warns me trying to change the file extension. Do I really want to do that? Yes, in this case, I know for sure I want this to be called index.html. So however you create it, whether it's with your favorite text viewer or if you do it this way, basically you just need to make this file called index.html, and it's completely blank inside. There's no text in this yet. So if I tried to run this HTML file in my browser, I would just get a blank web page. So let's see. So that's how we should set this folder up. So we've got, again, top level, my web map, a folder inside that called docs. And then inside our docs folder, we have our campuscats.js file, which contains our data, and this index.html, which is just a blank document at this point. All right, so are we ready to go? You can give me a green check mark if you're ready. If you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat, and then our helpers will help you out, or they will let me know that you have questions that need answering. Okay, I'm seeing some green checks. That's good news. Someone's mentioning you can clone the repository and also get the data, which is true. That is also an option if you're familiar with GitHub and you're comfortable cloning things. By all means, you can do it that way, and you'll get, there's data in one of the folders as well. I put it in the box drive just because it can be a little bit easier for folks to find it if you're not familiar with GitHub. So either way you get it, it's fine. It's the exact same data. Okay, so it looks like a good number of folks are ready to move on. Remember that our helpers can help you in the chat if you need some more help or you need to catch up with things. All right, so we did our setup. We should be ready to go to move on to the next part of the workshop. Bring this over here. Close some tabs since we don't need those. All right, so we're going to move on to section 3, where we're going to start with the first part of our workflow. We talked about how the main workflow for making a web map is to build the web page and then build the web map itself. So we're going to start on the building the web page part of things. a little introduction into HTML for those of you who are less familiar with it. HTML is the way that we build web pages. Really, that is the language of web pages. So HTML stands for hypertext markup language. You don't really need to know that. It will work whether you know what that stands for or not. If you've ever worked with things like R Markdown and GitHub Markdown, it's somewhat related. Those are all ways of styling text in a standard way, but you'll notice that there are some differences from things like the Markdown languages you may have worked with R and with GitHub and Jupyter Notebook. So the big key thing to understand with HTML is that every single element that you put into a web page ideally should have a tag associated with it. So you could just put text in a web page and it'll figure it out, but really ideally it needs to have a tag that tells the web page how to render that and what kind of object it is, whether it's text or an image or a link or something like that. So everything has a tag. Everything has not just a tag, it has an opening tag and a closing tag. So everything that goes in a web page ideally has something that tells the web page, hey, we're going to start making this kind of object, and now we've done that and we're finished, so here's the closing tag. So an example of this you can see in the workshop materials is for a paragraph, for example, just regular text, we put the letter P with opening and closing angle brackets around it to start a paragraph or regular text. And then when we're done writing our regular text, we have a closing tag. In this case, for paragraph, we have /P wrapped in the angle brackets. Almost everything that you do with HTML needs that opening and closing tag. There are a couple of things you'll see today, for example, like a line break, which is the BR tag, and that one doesn't need a closing tag on that particular one. You can, if you want to be super proper, you would just have the opening BR and then the closing BR right after each other, but it's not necessary to close that particular one. And there's a few other ones that are like that, but for the most part, you need an opening and a closing tag. If you don't close it, what happens is it just keeps rendering everything. Like if I had like a heading 1 tag, for example, in our example here, and I didn't close it, it would just keep, everything would be a heading 1 after that until I closed it. So it is kind of very literal about things. It doesn't guess well. So for example, here, if we wanted our heading to be, this is a heading, we would wrap it in an H1 tag and then closing H1 tag after it. And we already talked about paragraph here. So there's another example of that. And we're going to do that in a second so you can actually see how this works. I've got some resources here. In particular, W3 Schools is a really good website to learn things like HTML and also some introductory JavaScript, which we're going to be working with later. So I highly recommend that. I'm always, whenever I'm doing new stuff on web pages and I need to remember either how I did something like table syntax, I always forget that. So I'm always over on W3 Schools looking at syntax, but also learning new things there is a really good resource. So I want to make you aware of that because it kind of has a funny name. Okay, so we're going to start building our web page. So we're going to go ahead, now that we've learned just a little smidgen about HTML, we are going to go ahead and start doing some coding. You never thought it was going to be that simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my web browser. So I'm on Windows and I'm just going to search for Atom because that's the it's not a web browser, it's a text editor. So I'm going to open Atom because that's the text editor I want to use today. But again, feel free to use whatever text editor you are happy with. Again, my favorite is Notepad++, but because it doesn't work on Mac, I wanted to use something that everyone could potentially follow along with. So this is Atom. When you start it up, it's trying to be so helpful. It opens all of these welcome things and you've got all this stuff open and you're like, I didn't open this. So what we're going to do first off with Atom is just close all the tabs. It's trying to be helpful, but I've found this to be rather confusing when I first started using it. I was like, why are there so many tabs open already? So I'm just going to close those and then we're going to find our folder. So for those of you who are familiar with the way that ArcGIS does their data navigation, you've seen this connect to folder situation. Adam works on a similar principle. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect to a folder. So the top level of our folder where all of our text documents might be. So I'm going to go up to File, and I am going to add a project folder. So you can also, if your screen looks similar to mine, there's that blue button to add a folder as well. But if it doesn't look the same, go to File, Add Project Folder. It's going to open my browser. So I know I put my stuff in my D drive in my Scratch workspace. I'm going to connect to my the folder that we made called My Web Map, because that's the top level of our project today. So once I've selected that, I've highlighted it, I'm going to click Select Folder. So again, I'm connecting to that top level My Web Map folder. I'm sorry, I don't think I can make the text bigger. It's probably really tiny on your screen. When I type over here, it'll be bigger. But you notice we have our file structure. So I've got my folder, My Web Map, and inside of that, I have a docs folder. And if I expand that, I've got my Campus Cats.js file in my index.html. Adam was helpful and decided to open this one for me. So it's already open, but if yours isn't, you can just double click and it should open it. So now we have our index.html file open in Adam, and you can see it's blank. We didn't put anything in this, we just made it. And so we're ready to start typing. Now, if you're following along in our workshop materials, I'm going to pull this over onto my other screen and I'm going to type for you, but you can still follow along with the materials on the written materials website. All right, so the first thing we need to do is put our cursor inside of our index.html file. And now we are going to do our first HTML coding. And of course, I told you everything needs an open and closing tag, but the first thing we're going to do has no closing tag. So I told you there was exceptions, but it does have angle brackets to start. And Adam is suggesting things, but we're going to ignore that for now. So we have open angle bracket and then an exclamation mark, and then capital doc type, because we're going to tell it what kind of document we're writing, and we're going to tell it that it's going to be HTML. I will be honest with you, I often forget the exact syntax for this, so I'm always looking this up, which is fine. That's why there's things on the internet and also my example code in my previous files. So we're going to tell it that it wants to be an HTML file just in case, you know, there was any confusion. On the next line, we are going to tell it that we are going to put, this is the place we're going to put our HTML. So I'm going to have an opening HTML tag, and then I'm going to make some space, and I'm going to close my HTML tag. So /HTML, and then wrapped all in angle brackets. Our website, everything we write is going to happen in this space because, like I said, everything in HTML needs opening and closing tags, including the website itself. So it really loves its tags. So we've done this. I'm going to go ahead and save it. So I'm going to open the file menu and tell it to save. Okay, so now let's try this. Let's see what we did. I'm going to come back to my file browser, and I'm going to double click on my index.html file. This is the same one we're editing. So it's going to be open in two different places, but it's okay because when I open this in the web browser, it's just going to render it. It's not going to edit. So we're not editing in two places. So I'm going to double click and it's going to open in my browser, and it popped up on my other screen. But this is what my website looks like. It's blank, but I made a website and it actually works because it didn't throw an error. And it's blank right now, but we're going to fix that in a second. So pat yourself on the back. You just made a website, a boring one, but we made a website today. So you've had success. If for some reason it doesn't load or throws an error, you're going to troubleshoot. Fortunately, we only have 3 lines of code, so hopefully it won't be too difficult. Okay, so that is our first success, which is exciting in some ways and really dull in other ways, but we will fix that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we are going to add a section to our HTML. So like I mentioned before, we're working inside these HTML tags. You'll notice in the workshop materials that we have highlighted sections of the code. And this is because as we work, we're going to work iteratively on very simple examples and then build complexity into it. So what's going to end up happening is I'm going to alter code inside of code we've already written. And it was a nightmare trying to figure out what was new. So we've added the highlighting in here to show you what's new. So if you block out this section in the middle here that's highlighted, this looks exactly like the code we just wrote. So we're going to add this highlighted section now into our code between the HTML tags. This is something we're trying. Let me know. This is a new workshop, so let me know how that goes. If you think of a better way to do this, I'm all ears. We're trying to make sure that this is understandable. Okay, so inside of our HTML tags now, we're going to make a section for our website that's called head. And you can think of the head section as a place where we're going to put things that the website needs to know, but it's not necessarily going to render them on the page itself. So I made my opening tag for head and then the closing tag. I often, if I'm going to type stuff inside, I'll make the opening tag and then the closing tag right away so that I know that I've got both things that I need and I don't forget to put the closing one. It's kind of like when you're working with parentheses in other coding languages. Sometimes you put them and then you fill in between so you don't end up with mismatched parentheses. The same thing can happen with tags in HTML. So you want to keep an eye on those. Okay, then inside of my head tag, I'm going to make another tag called title. Oops, let's type correctly. So I've got title, and then again, I'm going to close it right away because otherwise I might get excited and forget. And then so inside my title tag, I'm going to name my website. So we're going to call it UC Davis Cats Map. So this is the name of our website. I'm just going to close up the white space for readability's sake. HTML doesn't really mind white space. You know, it's not too picky about that. So I've named my website UC Davis Cats Map. And so I'm going to go ahead and save that. I wish they'd put the save at the top. So that's saved. And now if I load my web page, if I come over here and I just click reload on my browser that has my website, we still haven't added anything on the website itself, but you'll notice that the tab now has a name. So the title that we give our website goes up in the tab text area. So we've now called our website UC Davis Cats Map, and that should render for you. So how cool is that? Now you know how those names get on the tabs. That's the title of the website. All right, so again, second success. I have to say, I get really excited about making web pages because it all still feels like magic to me. And I just really like it. So if my enthusiasm is a little over the top, that's why. All right, so now we're gonna actually write something on our website. We've had a little success there and we're going to add to this. So again, we are starting simple and we're adding in complexity. You'll see this when we get into the JavaScript as well. All right, so I'm going to make a body section and the body, so tag with body, and then I'm going to close it. The body, there we go. So the body section is where everything happens in a web page. So this is the sort of the bread and butter, the middle of it, where the information goes. So what I want to do first is I'm going to make a heading. So I want to put the tag H1 to make a big heading, and then I'm going to close it right away just so that I don't forget. And then inside of that tag, so between my angle brackets there in the middle, I am going to put my title again. So I want a big banner at the top that says UC Davis Cats Map. And then so that'll be my heading, big fat heading at the top. And then I want to make a paragraph. So I'm going to use the P tag like we talked about before, and then I'm going to close it again. So closing P tag. And then inside of those tags, I'm going to put some information. So I'm going to say this web map shows the locations of UC Davis community cats. So I've got a little bit of information in there. We're not going to go crazy today with the text because our point is to make a web map, but this way we've seen how to make a website with a little bit of information. So I'm going to go ahead and save what we've done. So I expect now when I reload my website to have a banner or like a heading at the top, a big fat one, and then some text. So here's what it looked like before. I'm going to reload it. And now I've got text on my web page. How cool is that? I just did this yesterday to practice, and I'm still excited about this because I don't know. I just think it's really fun. Just wait until we actually put something exciting in there. Okay, so we have our web page and we have some text in it. You'll see on the workshop materials, if for some reason something has gone awry and you want to catch up, I have a link to the code that we've just done. So you can go to our, this links to our GitHub repository and it has the code. So you can just grab this code and put it into your page and catch up if something didn't quite go the way that you expected it to. Maybe it's not super necessary at this moment, but later when we get more complex, it might make your life a little bit easier because there'll be other links to other sections of the code as we go. Okay, are there any questions that I can answer at this moment? Looking at the chat, it looks like everything is under control. So, all right, so we are going to, let me bring this back over. We're going to move into the fourth section of our workshop then, where we're going to start building our leaflet map. So again, here's the link to catch up if something went wrong in your general building of a web page, or if you have questions about what yours should look like if you want it to be the same as mine. But also feel free to explore and add more things to your web page, maybe put your name on it and things like that. Okay, so we have our basic web page. It's not very exciting, but we don't need something super exciting at this point, because our goal is really to build a web map. So this will just give us a little bit of context for our map. Okay, so I'm going to move this over to the side. Again, I'm going to be working off the notes in the materials, so feel free to continue following along there. And then I will type on the shared screen so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do to be able to use Leaflet as a JavaScript library is to actually load the Leaflet functionality. So we're going to have to load the Leaflet JavaScript file. And if, for those of you who work in things like R or Python, you can think of this as kind of like a package or library that you're loading in order to add functionality to the tool that you're using. So right now we're working in plain HTML, but we want the tools that the Leaflet library has, so we have to load them and we have to tell the website that we're building where to get that functionality so that it can use the functions that we want. So what we need to do is a couple of things. We're going to be working in the head section of our code. So this section here with between the labels, between the tag that says head and then the closing tag underneath there. So we're going to do everything right now for this step in just this section. Again, that's why we've got the text highlighted in the code in the workshop materials, because we're going to be inserting things in different places. But right now we're working in that head section. So I'm going to copy and paste this from the workshop materials. And the reason for that is because there's a URL in there. And otherwise, if I try to type that by hand, it's not going to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that so I'm copying this text from, oh, it's not going to let me go over. Oops, sorry. I can navigate a web page. Here we go. So I'm copying this set of text right here to begin with, because there is that link in there. So what I'm going to do is underneath the title, I'm going to add in, I'm going to paste in my code. Again, really long URL. There we go. I'm going to make some space below my closing tag. So what we just put in here is a link to the Leaflet CSS file. And what the CSS file does, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Basically, it's the rules for how to render things on the website. So it has, it tells your browser, you know, given a certain class of object, remember everything has some kind of label associated with it. Given a certain class of object, how do I render that? Is it blue? Is it 12 points tall? Is it, you know, in a gray box? That kind of thing. So it has all the rules about how to render leaflet associated objects. You can monkey with this. You can certainly build your own thing, but we're going to go ahead and use the one that is already available to us. So this is available on a website. And we're going to go ahead and make use of the fact that it's already written for us. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy in the next line here to Just going to grab those 2 lines. I'm going to copy them and I'm going to paste them also right underneath where we added our style sheet. And this is the link you can see from the comment code here. This is the link that gives us the actual JavaScript library. Again, I'm not going to type this out because there's these really long codes in here for the integrity stuff. So it's better to just copy and paste these. And you can find these on various websites and find the official versions of this. So we're just going to copy and paste that in. So again, we loaded in the leaflet CSS file from another website, and then we also loaded in the JavaScript library file itself from another website. And we do these with the JavaScript is actually a script. So we have the script tag on here. And that's where that comes from. So these are the 2 things that make it possible for us to use the leaflet library. And again, all of that goes in this section called head. Because this is something the website needs to know, but it's not necessarily going to put it on the site itself. Like you won't see it on the website, but it's working in the background. Okay, so we can go ahead and save this. This actually won't do anything on to the visuals of our website, but we can come here and I'm going to reload it and just make sure everything still loads and it doesn't throw an error. If we do something wrong, sometimes in the head section, the whole thing won't load, and that's a good indication that we need to go back and do some troubleshooting. But if you load your web page and nothing changes, then we're good to go. All right, so that is how we get access to the leaflet, the leaflet library, all of the functions within the leaflet library. A quick note, we have these might be a little hard to read on the shared screen, but if you're working in Atom, you'll see it grays them out. Anything that starts with angle brackets and an exclamation mark, and dashes like this, and then followed up by 2 dashes and an angle bracket, that's a comment in HTML. So that doesn't render for the website itself. It's a comment that's specifically for us as humans who are doing the coding to read it. So that later when I come back to this code, I'm like, what the heck is this long thing all about? I have this human readable section that says, oh, this is the thing that loads the leaflet CSS file. And then I go, oh yeah, I remember that. So it helps me know as a coder, as I'm coming back to things, what I'm doing, and I can leave myself messages. All right, so we've got our leaflet library loaded and we're ready to add some things. The next thing we're going to do is we need to make what's called a div in a website. I think it's short for division. You can think of it as a section in your website. So we need to make a div where we are going to put our web map itself, because everything that we work with Leaflet has to go into its own section of the website. So basically it's giving it a place to live. So what we want to do is this goes in the body section of our website. So I'm going to close up this a little bit and make a little more space here so we can see the difference between these. So I'm working in the section, remember we made earlier, called body, that has the text on our website, but it's also going to have the place where we have our web map, because this is the part that actually gets seen on the website itself. So the body section, again, is where all of the text and the visual stuff on the website lives. So what I want to do is I'm going to make this new tag that's called div. And inside of it, we're going to give it some parameters. So a lot of tags, you can just have a regular tag, but sometimes you can pass it information that it needs. So I'm going to give it an ID because we want to be able to call this specific div by name. So the ID I'm going to give it is, I'm going to call it map ID. And if you see other leaflet tutorials, they'll sometimes call it like my map or map one. It does not matter what you call it. It just matters that you remember what you called it, because you'll need to know what it's called later. All right, so I'm making a div and my div's name is map ID here. I'm going to give it some style information. So I can use this style parameter. And I'm going to say style equals, and then the information I'm going to give it, and Atom is being helpful the way RStudio is, and it's giving me open and close quotation marks already so that I make sure that they're matched. So I'm going to tell it I want the width of this particular div to be 600 pixels. And then I'm going to give it a semicolon because I'm going to tell it some more information. I'm going to tell it to make the height of the map div 400 pixels. So I'm going to have a 600 by 400 pixel square area to put my map in. And we can play with that later if we decide later, like, oh, we really want it to be different size, we can adjust that. So that's our style information. So I'm going to close my angle bracket. So in our opening tag for our div, we're telling it, call this specific div map ID, and it needs to be a particular size, which is 600 pixels wide and 400 pixels tall. And then I don't have any information to pass it besides that this is the end of the div. So this line we just wrote basically makes a right now invisible box where the map is going to live. So you can think of it as like the place where it's going to go on the page. But this puts it in relation to the text. So we're going to have our title at the top, our paragraph information about what this map is. And then underneath that is where the text goes. I see somebody is telling me I need to close my div tag. Yes, thank you. Otherwise, that would have broken. So I appreciate that you all are paying attention. Thanks, Christy. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, go up to File and click Save. All right. And this is another section where I'm going to go ahead and reload my page, but nothing has changed yet because there actually is the div in the page, but again, it's invisible right now. There's a place for it, but we haven't put anything in it. So it's an empty box. But it's good to check and make sure that it loads because again, if I hadn't closed my tag, it might have been broken. All right, do we have any other questions up until that point? All right. I'm glad y'all are paying enough attention to notice that I missed some things in my coding. I actually do really appreciate the extra set of eyes. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we have our blank div, which is fun, but not really. It's kind of boring because it's just a blank web page. Now we need to start putting in the code that actually builds the web map. And the way that we do this is inside of our body of our website. So we're in the body section again. We need to make a section for our script. So this is going to be where our JavaScript lives that actually builds the map that's going to live inside of the div that we just made. So I'm going to give myself a few blank lines of space here just because that makes my brain happy, but feel free to put as little or as much white space as you like. So I'm going to make a section for a script. And again, I'm going to close that right away with the closing slash. So easy to forget that. So our building of our web map is going to happen between these two script tags. And at this point, if you're following along in the workshop materials, there's a link for the example code. So if you've gotten to this point and something has gone awry or you want to check something and see if your code looks the way that mine does, you can go to that part of our GitHub repo with the link and see what, so you can make comparisons and things like that, or catch up if you need to do that. Okay, so what have we done so far? We've built our web page, we put information in it, we've loaded our JavaScript library, and now we've made a div, so that's the place where the map is going to live. And we've started our script. We've made a place to put our script. So now we're ready to actually do some of the coding to make the map itself. So now things will start happening in our map. It will be a little bit more exciting than me showing you, reload your map and it's blank. Okay, so we're gonna do everything inside that script section of our site. I make a note in the workshop materials that we're only going to be working in the script section for a while. So the materials are just going to show the script and not everything else that's in the script itself. But again, we have links to the completed materials so you can see the whole thing if you need to. We're just saving some real estate. All right, so we're going to now, this is the weird part about what we're doing. So we have an HTML web page. But inside the HTML web page, we're going to be working in JavaScript. So that's a different language, a different programming language. So, and then later on, I hate to tell you, I'm going to put some HTML inside of the JavaScript. So it's all kind of nested. Give yourself some patience here. It can be a little harrowing for your brain to switch so many times between different languages. So just to have some patience and ask a lot of questions if you have them. All right. So I see Alex is making comments about adding white space to make it more human readable. I agree about that, but sometimes I've had projects where I open up my HTML and the program I'm using has collapsed all the white space. So that can happen, but then I'd go in and put it back in so I can read it. Was there another question?
Yeah, Michelle, it sounds like people are curious if it matters if like you have your div tags and your paragraph tags all on one line, but the script tags you have separated on 2 lines. And just, I think people want to confirm that that's just white space and not something special with the tags.
It's more a question of why the /div is not after the script. Like, see how there is the body and then all of this is getting embedded within the body.
Yes.
But whereas div opens and ends, and then you have the script. So that's what I'm unclear about.
Yeah, so this is one of the things about HTML that can be confusing. So the div is happening just in this spot, and there's nothing that goes into that. Like there's no text or anything that goes into the div to make the map. What's going to happen is the script that we're going to write will apply to this div. So you can think of the script as going to put stuff in here for us. But it's kind of a nesting issue. Like Shruti, I know you work in R and other programming languages. So it's kind of like when you have a function inside of another function, you kind of build that out. Some things have to finish before other things can start, but sometimes things are wrapped in other things. So I know I'm not explaining this really well, but basically everything that happens on the website happens inside of the body tags. And then we need the div to open and close right away. And then the script section is going to, everything that happens in the script is actually going to apply to this div. So that's kind of why they're in the order they're in. Alex, do you have a better explanation for this than I'm doing?
I think the last thing you highlighted is the key, is that the div needs to exist so that the script can operate on it.
Can I ask a follow-on question then?
Yeah.
Will the script talk to that div using that ID, the map ID that you said we have to remember what it is?
Yes.
Yes.
So that, okay. So they are connected, just not by nesting them within the tags.
Yeah. So it's like, you can think of it as the div as an empty box, and we put the empty box on the table, which is the web page. And now we're going to put stuff in it using the script. So that's the method. I don't know if that analogy is helpful, but hopefully it is. This is one of the less fun things I think about JavaScript and Leaflet in particular, is understanding what's happening where and why. This took me a while to get, so I'm glad you guys are asking questions, because this is definitely one of the parts that I find to be more tricky about Leaflet, that you have to make this div and then you make a script that operates on the div. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to putting some things into the script, and hopefully, I'm not sure it will help to see it, but at least we'll have a pretty something that shows up on the screen. So we'll feel a little bit more successful. I'm going to make a tab over just so that I've got a little indent. HTML honestly does not care about this. So this is just for our human brains to keep things separated. You could do 2 tabs if you want. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a comment. Remember, we're in JavaScript now, so the comment code is different. It's not the angle bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash thing that HTML wanted. It's 2 slashes. This is analogous to, like, if you're working in R and you use the hash symbol, pound sign, whatever you want to call it, that makes a comment. In JavaScript, it's 2 slashes. So I'm going to make myself a note that I want to add an empty map. I'm going to call it cat map. So I'm making a note to myself that that's what that term means, to the page in the map ID div. Spelling things correctly helps. So this is just a comment to me, because I will forget next week if I come back to this. I'll be like, wait, what is cat map? And then I have the note that says, it's because I'm calling my empty map cat map. because I'm putting cats on the map. What did you do? Sorry, Adam is trying to be helpful. There, that's better. So be aware of autocomplete. Oh, I also spelled something wrong, but it's a comment, so it doesn't really matter. I could spell it however I want in the comments, and as long as I know what it means, then we're good. Okay, so this is where I'm going to make my empty map. So the way the way Leaflet works is we make an empty map and then we put stuff in it. So I guess you can think of it as like a bunch of boxes containing other boxes that contain stuff. I'm sorry, it's a mental leap on this one to make a good analogy. But what I do need to do is I'm going to declare my variable, which is called cat map. So I'm making an object called cat map, and now I'm going to tell it what. So what is cat map? Now that you've said I should make it, what is it? So I'm going to say cat map equals, and l.map is the Leaflet function that makes the map. What do I want it to be? I need to tell it where to put this. So I'm telling it, I'm putting it in my map ID div. Remember, we called our div up here map ID. So it's saying, hey, cat map is a map that I'm going to make inside that div. And then I give it a comment, and then I have some things, some parameters for it. So I'm giving it curly brackets. And I'm going to make a new line, and we're going to put stuff on the next line just for readability. You could make this one big line, but also for workshop stuff, it's better if it doesn't run off the edge of the page for you all to read it. So the parameters I'm going to give it, I want it to have a specific center point. So I can give it the
Okay, it sounds like, looks like Michele had a little bit of trouble. And she will be back momentarily. It looks like she's left the meeting. I probably am not the best person to field any questions, but if there's any questions now, we can put them into the chat, or you can raise your hand, or we can just wait.
It's coming back. It was
Okay.
an internet outage.
I wasn't sure if it was my internet frozen, or I didn't know if we'd lose you too. On a windy day, you never know what's going to happen. So. Okay. Welcome back, Michele.
Hey all, sorry about that. It's windy in West Davis today, so our internet just blipped. I like to say that Davis infrastructure is wind soluble, because as soon as we get wind, we lose things like internet. So I apologize for that. We are going to catch back up. I'm not 100% sure where the internet cut out, and I was just talking to my computer by myself. So I'll back up a bit. But if anyone remembers about the last place I was, you can let me know.
You were just adding the center. You've added map ID and just adding the center.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Good thing I made people co-host, so I didn't just kick you all out of the the workshop when I got booted. All right. Okay, so we are back. So we didn't lose too much then. So again, where we were at before our unfortunate internet situation is we made our script section, and then we started making our cat map. So we declared our cat map variable, and we said cat map is going to be this l.map function. It's going to apply to our map div called map ID. And we're giving it the parameter for the center. So it's going to be centered on the UC Davis quad. And then the next thing I want to do is tell it what the zoom level should be. There's a default, but we're going to set it to 15. And that will tell it how far to zoom in. So this is going to zoom in fairly far so that we're not just looking at the whole region. And the last thing I want to do is actually want to have a semicolon at the end of all of this, because that tells it that that's the end of that particular line. So that is what makes our empty map. That won't be too exciting unless we add some things to it. So what I want to do is add our base map that we're going to use today. So again, I'm going to start with a comment so that I remember what I'm doing. I'm going to add the base map, which is the Stamen toner tiles. Oh, somebody's pointing out we've got an extra div. Where did that come from? Who knows? Good question. Let's go ahead and get rid of that because I can see my div here is, oh, you know, I probably did that when I was started it on accident, but thank you again. Like, it's helpful to have the extra set of eyes. Oops. Making sure that things are not broken. So this will be a much better web page thanks to you all checking my my coding. Maybe that was what was causing some of the confusion earlier too. All right, so in this part of the code, I'm going to add my base map. Again, this is just a comment. It doesn't do anything for the web page. It's just for me to read. So I'm going to actually copy and paste this next section out of the materials. So I am getting this section here. I'm not going to get the comment because I already typed that out. The reason that I'm copying and pasting this rather than typing it is because I usually actually find this code on the internet and then copy and paste it in anyway, because this is how you use the toner layer from Stamen. So I need to get it right, and it's better if I find somebody who's done it correctly and make sure that this is going to work. So some of the things that are going on here is I'm telling it I'm using L.tile layer, which is going to make the tile layer that I'm going to use. It has to come from a particular place. It is required by the license for this particular tile service to give attribution. So that's what this line does. You'll see it makes a little just unobtrusive line at the bottom of our map that says where this information is coming from. And that's important because Stamen makes this available to us for free, but they do require attribution. And it's important as academics for us to say where we got our data from. And then this subdomains part is something that it needs to run. And then we can set our zoom levels. You can change these. Basically, it tells it how far you're allowed to zoom in and how far you're allowed to zoom out. I think this is the standard, the full range of this particular data set. But say I didn't want people to be able to zoom more than, to zoom out very far, or maybe I don't want them to zoom in very far, I can change these numbers. And then the last part at the bottom here is really important. We have to tell it, we declared this variable, we've made our toner layer. So that's our background data. You can think of it as a base map. But if we don't add it to the map, it doesn't know where to go. So this last piece is really important. We want to say, we're going to call cat map, which we declared up here. And we're going to say, hey, cat map, we're going to add this layer to you, which we declared to be called Stamen toner. So it's saying, hey, cat map, go get this and put it inside the map. So now if we save this, and if I didn't make any more massive typos, which you guys are so good at catching for me, I'm going to come back to my my website in my browser, and I'm going to reload it. Look at that, we made a map. It doesn't have any data in it of ours yet, but we made a map. This is a Slippy map. I can grab it and drag it. I can explore it. I can zoom in. Look, there's the quad. So we can play with that. It's really cool, honestly, because we're taking someone else's data from the internet and we're putting it inside of our map. And we're really grateful that Stamen makes some really awesome web maps. Like tile layers that you can use. So this one's called Toner. They have another one that's really fun and pretty called Watercolor, which I like. And there's also Toner Light, which is a slightly different version of what we're using today. And I think there's some other ones too, but those are the ones I tend to use just because they're they provide really good contrast versus like using an air photo layer, which has a lot of stuff going on. This will provide a really nice background for making our data kind of show up a little bit better. And down here at the bottom is, remember how I talked about the attribution? That's what this line does. It makes this information about like this was built in Leaflet, you know, the tiles are coming from Stamen, it's using OpenStreetMap data. So nice open data set. We just have to use attribution when we use it. Okay, now hopefully you feel like you're doing something. We made a web page today and we made a web map. It doesn't have any data in it yet, but you made a web map today. We are now going to make it more interesting. And we're going to add some markers to it. So underneath everything that we've been working on, we are going to add another thing to it. We are going to add a marker for our quad with the tooltip. So again, I'm going to put a comment, oops, 2 slashes so that I remember what we're doing. Add a marker for the quad with a tool tip. That also helps me if I have to like get up in the middle of coding to remember what I was working on and what the goal was. So what we want to do is we're going to declare another variable. So we're going to say var marker. So we're calling this new variable marker. And now we're going to define what that is after the equal sign. So we're going to say new, I keep spelling things inside out today. New L dot marker. So L dot marker makes a marker. And then we have to pass it some information. In this case, it wants the coordinates. I'm going to copy and paste those out of the materials, just again, so I don't end up like in Arkansas or something on accident. So we're going to make this new marker and it's going to be centered on the quad because that's what those coordinates are. And then after the square brackets, we're going to give it some more information. So we're going to use curly brackets because that's how we pass that other information, the parameters, into our marker. And again, I'm going to make a new line just because that makes my brain happy. I'm going to set the opacity, make sure I spelled that right. I'm going to tell it to be 1 so that it's completely opaque. The default is, I think, slightly transparent, but I want to make it completely opaque. All right, and then I'm going to end everything with a semicolon because that makes our marker. Next, we need to make our tooltip that goes on our marker. So it's going to be a pop-up that says something. So the way that Leaflet works is we often build things up. We make the marker, we make the tooltip, and then we add the whole lot of stuff to the map itself. So we define a bunch of things and then we say, okay, stuff that I just made, go on the map. So the next thing we need to do is make our marker tooltip. So we're saying, we're calling our variable marker that we just made, and we're saying, okay, marker, we want you to have a tooltip. So we're going to use bind tooltip, which is a function. And then we need to tell it what it should say. So this is where you get your next taste of embedding other languages inside of languages. So inside of our tooltip, we're going to write some more HTML. So we're going to make this bold. So I'm going to use the tag B. So B in angle brackets makes things bold in HTML. And I'm going to write the word quad because this is going to be a tooltip centered on the UC Davis quad. And then I'm going to close my bold tag with again /B. So that should look familiar, but it's inside of JavaScript. So we've got HTML inside of JavaScript inside of HTML. Again, I'm sorry, this is just how it works. And then it could have parameters, but we don't have any. So we're going to put the little curly brackets, but leave it blank and end the whole line with a semicolon. So we made our marker here where we declared our variable marker. Then we added a tooltip to it, and the tooltip is going to say quad on it. Now, the last thing we need to do is tell the marker. So we're going to call marker, and we're going to say marker, we're going to add you to the map. So add to that the add to function says, okay, add it to, and then we have to say what it adds to, in this case, cat map, because that is our map that will later contain cats. And that's what we declared up here. Okay, so what I will expect, I'm going to go ahead and save this. I will expect now when I reload my web page that we will now have a new marker if I did everything the way it should be. So I'm going to reload. Look at that, I have a marker, and if I hover over it, it has the word quad, because this is the UC Davis quad. So we've got our marker centered right in the middle of the quad with the, I don't know why it's being colored 2 different colors, probably because there's 2 different sides to it. And then we have a tooltip that comes up that says quad. So now you put stuff on a map. That's pretty cool. I hope that was fun and exciting, but I'm not happy with that. I want to add more things because I was promised cats on a map. So that's what we're going to do. I will mention that if you are following along and something went awry, we have at this point, you can click on the link to get to the example code and you'll have completed code ready to compare with what you're writing or just grab to run to see what it does. So this should work if you are needing some functional code. All right, so we've got a little bit of time left, and now we're going to get into working with external data. So coding this way, where we make one marker by hand and we tell the marker, go live at this particular set of coordinates, is lovely when I have, you know, it depends on your threshold, 2, 3 by hand, probably okay. If I get much more than like 5 or 6, I'm probably going to start making mistakes, and I would really rather have my data in a data set that I can control in ways that I'm used to interacting with my data. So things that I can put in my GIS or other things that I use to work with data, like a spreadsheet or a database. So how do we work with external data then if we're coding these by hand? And the answer is we're not going to code them by hand anymore. We're going to work with a data set. In this case, we are going to be working with a GeoJSON data set that we have to do a little bit of work on to make Leaflet be able to read it. So I'm bringing over our workshop materials to show you where I'm reading from. So a little bit about GeoJSON. It's an open format. It's text-based. I've got an example of what it looks like inside with a little bit of alteration. Just I took out the URLs from this. If you open up your JavaScript file, your campuscats.js, you'll see it looks really similar to this. So this is just text, but the text is formatted in a way that we can, it's formatted so that we can actually use it, and everything is structured. Everything has paired information. So for example, we have information on this line about the name of the cat. In this case, the name information is that the name is Bob. There's a description which actually has a URL in it. And again, I pulled out the URL just so you could actually read this and not have this big old URL with all kinds of letters in it. And for example, here we have details, and then we have text about the details of who Bob is. And then also we have geometry information. So every single line of data in our GeoJSON file has this. You can convert, this is vector data, so you can convert pretty much any vector data format into GeoJSON format with your standard GIS desktop programs or with anything that uses the GDAL library. I will say be careful with the last time I worked with GeoJSON in the Esri suite, they have a slightly different format, which doesn't always play nice with everything that's expecting standard GeoJSON. So just make sure that if you're going to convert using the Esri tools, that you're getting what you expect. And if it doesn't work out, maybe try a different method of converting into GeoJSON. Just a little caveat there. So we make our GeoJSON data, which I've already done for you. That's what's in your campuscats.js file. We would spend all day on this workshop formatting data if we didn't do it for you. But so once we make your JSON file, what happens is to make it work with Leaflet, we have to put a little bit of information inside of it to turn it into JavaScript so that Leaflet can read it. And basically what we've done is if you open your, I can show you in Atom. So if I open up my Campus Cats file, you can see we've added this line at the top to make a variable called Campus Cats that now contains my GeoJSON. And then at the very bottom, we're just closing up that curly bracket we started with. So that's how you make GeoJSON readable for Leaflet and turn it into JavaScript. And I've already, again, I did that for you. That's what's in your campuscats.js file. But I figured walking you all through editing a text document in this way would be not a good use of our time. So we went ahead and did that for you. Okay, so yay, that's already done. We just need to now use it in our web page. So the next section tells us how to do that. So I'm going to go back to Adam and I'm going to go back to my index.html file. Actually, I'm going to close campuscats.js so I don't accidentally alter it. So what we need to do is inside of our script file, I'm actually, you could probably put this in a multitude of places, but I'm going to put it right after our line that makes our map div, just so that I'm comfortable with where it is. So we're going to add in a line that reads our data. So this is going to be a new script section right above our other script section. So I'm going to make my script and I'm going to close my script so that everything is matched. But inside of my opening script tag, I need to give it some information. And what I want it to do is tell it that my source, so src, is going to be equal to campus_cats.js. So that's our file name where we're storing our data. And then I need to tell it that the type of file, type equals, and then in quotes, it's text / JavaScript, so that it knows how to read that. So this line just, it's similar to how we loaded our leaflet.js file, except it's coming from our local file system. And we're just saying, hey, HTML, go ahead and read this script for us. And it's going to be JavaScript. And so it will know what to do with that. Basically, what this file does is it declares a variable that we know the name of, because I think it's called Campus Cats. And it basically has all of that data that we had in our GeoJSON file is now become a variable called Campus Cats when it reads this. So we've made our data now available in our website to be able to put data on the map. All right, do we have any questions that I should address before we move on?
Looks like we had a question in the chat about file paths that so it was pointed out that this file is in the same folder because we were very careful to set it up that way. But if it wasn't, I guess you'd put a path name.
Yes, exactly. So if you had like a, maybe inside of your docs folder, if you wanted to have a data folder because you had multiple data sources and you want to keep those separate, you could put the path to that instead of what we have. We're keeping it super simple today, just but yes, you can get more complicated. So that's a really good question. All right, so now I think we're ready to take that data we just loaded and let's make some points for our cat. So we actually have cats on a map. So what we want to do is we're going to go down to our the script section that you can see this is getting pretty big, right? So we've got our script section that has all of our information about adding the map and the tile service layer from Stamen and all that. And I'm going to go to the very bottom right before we have the /script closing tag. And I am going to make a note to myself that I'm going to indent this too so that it's just in line with everything else. Not that it matters, but it makes my brain happy. So we're going to add our cat points from the GeoJSON file. Okay, so that is going to tell me what we are doing. Adam is being less than helpful. It's adding things in I did not ask for.
Yeah, the problem is the default key binding for enter is to accept the auto completion.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, that Adam's not the one I tend to use, so I'm a little new with this one. So thanks for bearing with me on that. Yeah, tooltips are helpful, but only to some extent. I also gripe about R Studio sometimes making extra parentheses and things for me that I don't want. Okay, so my gripes aside, so we're going to go ahead and add in our points for our cat. So we're going to, again, we're going to declare a variable and we're going to call it cat points. You can call this whatever you want. This is up to you. But what matters here is we're going to tell it to use l.json, which is a way to add JSON data from our script. And we want to get our campus cats variable. It's giving me the tooltip, or it's giving me the auto completion for that because we declared that. So again, campus cats is declared inside the data file. And then we want to give it some parameters. So this might start to look a little familiar. So inside, when we do anything, when we declare anything in Leaflet, there's often, we tell it where to go or what to operate on, and then we give it parameters after that. So what I want to do is use this point to layer function. And we are going, I guess we're making the point to layer function, and we're going to call it calling function. We are telling it to use the feature at hand, the lat long, which comes from the file itself. Like each line has these things associated with it. And then we also can give that some information about how this function is going to work. And we're going to tell it, we want it to return l.circle marker. So we're going to make a circle marker with this function. It's going to use the lat long from each of the features, so each of the lines of data. And then we're going to give it, again, some parameters. We're going to tell it we want the color to be, single quotes, orange. That's just like in a lot of other programming languages, there's some reserved color names. So orange is one of them. You can also use hex code. So if you want to use like hex codes that you find on the internet for specific colors, you can do that too. Or to match other things like, I don't know if you've already picked colors. If you're using this for like a journal supplement, you might want to match your colors to other maps you have. And then the other thing I'm going to do is tell it to have a radius of 8 so that that's the size of the circle itself. And then I need a semicolon after that. And then, so we already have our closing bracket there. I'm going to close up this white space. And then at the very end of this, I need to tell it, again, we've declared a thing, we told it what to do, but we haven't told it where to go. So at the very end, what we want to do is tell it add to and then cat map. So this is similar to what we did before and then ended up with a semicolon. So all of this tells it to take each line of our GeoJSON file and make a circle marker for its lat long. Make the circle marker orange and radius of 8 and tell it to go on cat map. So that's what that line or that set of code does. I'm going to click save, and then I'm going to reload my data. So now we have, remember, we made this marker here with our quad location, and then we have markers here for orange cats. So these are where individual cats live on campus. And so if you're familiar with campus, you may be familiar with some of these cats, or you may just have discovered some new cats that you can go visit when you're on campus. All right, so that's starting to actually look like a web map now, which is good. So we've got another little bit of time left. So what I want to do is forge on and add a pop-up to this. So right now, if you click on your orange cat markers, nothing happens. It might recenter, but it's not giving you any additional information. But what we can do is tell it for each of our cats that we want it to tell us some information. So what I want to do is in our code that we just built, right after return our circle marker, what I want to do is add a comma here, and I'm going to add a new line. And I'm going to write a function that tells it what to do with each feature. So I'm going to say on each feature, make this function. So I have a function, and in parentheses, it's going to take the information of each feature, so each line of data, and then it's also going to take this parameter layer. And from that, we're going to do the next set of things. So it's going to take those parameters and it's going to do something. In this case, I'm going to tell it to take the layer that we're working on, and I'm going to use the bind pop-up function find pop-up, and then I'm going to tell it what to put in the pop-up. And we're going to be really simple at first. We're going to say this is a pop-up. And then we want to make sure we've got semicolon, and then we've got our closing parentheses. I'm checking back and forth between my code and the example code to make sure that it has the right number of brackets and things, because it's really easy to get off. I'm going to click save, and then let's load this guy up and see if that happens. So it looks the same, but when I click on one of them, it says this is a pop-up. I made a pop-up, yay. Doesn't say anything yet, but let's add some things. I think we should have time to at least get a pretty decent looking pop-up. Okay, so we don't need it to just say this is a pop-up, but it's nice to add things one at a time that we can then add complexity to. So instead of saying this is a pop-up, it would be really nice if it actually had something of use. Like, let's put the name of the cat in the pop-up so that we know when I click on a cat, I know what the cat's name is. So maybe if I go visit the cat on campus, I'll know what to call them. So what I want to do, instead of having the just text that says this is a pop-up, I can actually call data from my data file. You can think of it, if you're familiar with shapefiles, you can think of it as like a column in your shapefile. And so what I can do is say feature, I could spell it. So feature calls on the file that we've loaded and says, okay, for each line, each feature in that data set, I'm going to call on its properties. And the property that I want is called name. So you would have to look at your data set and find out what the column name was that you wanted to use. But in this case, our cat names live in a column name that's called name. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now when I reload my map, when I click, now I click and I find it, oh, that the pop-up tells me that that cat's name is Clementine. And this cat over here is the DC cat, so the dining commons cats. There's a bunch of orange cats that live over there. The arboretum cats live in the arboretum. Okay, that's a little not surprising. Cafe Walter, that's there's a cafe. Well, it's not there anymore, but there was a cafe on campus that was named after a cat named Walter that lived inside the Mondavi Center. So that's really cool. Now we have pop-ups and we can say what each cat's name is. Look, there's Coco. So fun. So you've actually made an interactive web map that draws data from an outside data source. So a data set that you're storing on your web page, it goes and reads that and puts the data in. So you did not have to hand code all of these dozens of campus cats, which is awesome because that's a lot of work to put in all of the vertexes. And that's just, we're doing points here. If you want to do polygons, you really don't want to have to do that by hand. You really want that in a data file that's separate that you can control in other ways. So someone's asking in the chat about the L part. That's a part of the way that the leaflet functions are named. So if you look at the leaflet reference materials, you'll see that that's just the name of the function. And I think Chrissy's probably right that L is for leaflet, but it's just the way that the functions are named. I know it can be confusing because you have like layer dot pop up, but L dot whatever doesn't really refer to L. So yay, we made a web map. The rest of the materials goes through and it augments what we've already done. So we can operate on this section of our pop-up to get more information. For example, I'm going to copy and paste in a more complicated thing, and then I'll talk you through what it means. So we had feature.properties.name that got our cat name, right? But now I want to tell in the pop-up, I wanted to say that this is the name and I want the word name to be bold. So I've got I've got HTML in here to make the word name bold, and then it's going to have the cat's name. So if I save that and I reload, so you can see how I like to build this iteratively. So now when I click on Clementine, it's going to say name is Clementine. So it's like I'm building a little web page inside of my pop-up that's pulling information from my data file that I have as a JavaScript file containing GeoJSON. So things get a little complicated on this, so try to keep stuff straight. Sometimes I'll actually literally write diagrams for myself to help keep it straight. If we want to get really complicated, I think what I'll do is I'll skip to the end and show you sort of the most complicated one, and we'll walk through what this all means. So I'm just going to go to the end and copy this. So I'm going to replace our information that we had before, and I'm going to replace it with this much more complicated one. I will say this does, you can't put spaces in this. It has to be on one line. Sometimes I'll build it with different lines, and then once I get it the way I want it, then I'll take the spaces out. But what we're doing here is we're telling it to start with an image. So I'm telling it to go get the image, and we actually have a link inside of the data. So it's going and getting that link for the image. And then it's building our name with our pulling the name from the data set. And then underneath that, I have a line break. That's what this BR is. Sorry, just this BR. Remember, BR is one of the tags that doesn't need a closing tag. And then I have the description. And after that, I'm telling it to go get the description out of the data set. So that's what this line does. And it kind of builds like a little web page inside of that pop-up. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to show you what this looks like. It's going to reload it. Oh, I broke something. I'm going to just copy and paste this so you can see. This is also why I have. Here we go. So I just copied and pasted from the workshop material so that I've got the right code rather than spending time finding the missing brackets and such. But this is also why I build things iteratively. There we go. Okay, so I fixed whatever missing brackety thing I had or some mixed up code. So when I click on our marker now, I get an image of the cats, what their name is, and then the description of them. So we've got some orange kittens that are living at the dining commons. They're cats now. Here's a description of Cafe Walter. So Walter was a cat that lived at our Performing Arts Center. So we can click around. Oh, that one doesn't have a picture. So this data set does have some missing pictures, and it also has some challenging character encoding, but that's something to work out with your data set. Here's Coco. She has a very cozy box. All right, so today you've seen a lot of stuff, and we got through a lot of things. And the main takeaway for today, I'm going to stop my screen share here. The main takeaway from today is that you've seen not only how to build a web page, you've learned how to add JavaScript functionality to your web page, and then also work with the Leaflet library in particular to build a web map that draws data not only from hard-coded data in your code, but also working with an outside data source, much in the same way you're used to working with data in like pretty much any other GIS situation. So you have an outside data file that you then can use inside of your web map. The final step of this is to put all of your files online. And the way we set up our file system for today's workshop is really agreeable for most ways that you will put things on the internet. And in the workshop materials, I have some more information about where to find instructions for, in particular, how to build a website with GitHub pages. So we're not going to go through that today. That could be its own workshop in itself, but there's a link there to help you. And then finally, in the workshop materials, we have a list of resources for things to learn to build on what we've done today. So things like the link to the Leaflet materials, the reference materials for Leaflet, a link to W3 Schools, which is a really good source for things like learning HTML and CSS and general JavaScript. And then also some more places to look, like where to look for things like other base maps. So you're not just using the Stamen Toner base map for the rest of your life. There's other links out there to other base maps that you can use in your Leaflet maps. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation for today. I hope you ended up with a lovely map of cats that you can now play with and you can share with all of your friends and colleagues and family and show them that you can now make web maps. I will hang out and answer any questions that you have, but I think what I'll do is I'll stop the recording so that if anyone's bashful and doesn't want to be recorded, that we can honor that for them. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we will hang out and answer some more questions.